Here I found myself, all because I was fleeing from magic. If I hadn't run away, I would have had to join the Guild of Magical Regulation. I was a watcher over one dubious lady who got involved with the wrong company. Suddenly, that very person was shot at, blood splattered in all directions. That unsavory company was shocked. Their only concern was who dared to shoot. It was me. To say that I caused a lot of trouble is an understatement. I got such rivals who are the most dangerous wizards in the whole world. But it's better to start the story from the beginning. All events started happening to me a month ago. I didn't even understand whether it was reality or a dream. I found myself at an interrogation, handcuffed. On my face, there was clearly a lack of understanding of everything that was happening, where I was, and who all these people were. A young man in a business suit, glasses, and black gloves introduced himself as Agent Terran from the Guild of Magical Regulation, pointing to a tattoo on his wrist. Terran informed me that I was being detained because I was allegedly involved in the attack on the fitness center. Of course, I had absolutely no involvement there, but the agent continued. It turns out that the whole thing was that I was a witness to the incident, and unlike everyone else, did not lose consciousness. And there was also a Dragonborn who was the one who caused this commotion. It didn't become any clearer. Straight ahead, they opened America for me. It turns out I'm a wizard and magic exists, of course. Where they got this from? But I was surprised. After these words, the interrogation began from the very beginning of my day. In the morning, I saw my mother off to the other world. That is, there was a funeral. And what put me on alert there, in the cemetery, was that there was a very strange person from whom I felt an aura. I was not very surprised, because I had met such people before. They constantly smelled of the otherworldly realm. And the most interesting thing is that other people do not see them. These meetings are always accompanied by terrible headaches for me. If you think about it, I've seen about 30 people with a magical inclination. Until this incident, I thought it was just my imagination playing tricks, but definitely not this time. One such person I encounter on a regular basis. And this is the owner of the gym that I attend. Whenever he greets me, when he sees me, I pretend that nothing special is happening. In this form I see him. Mr. Sheehy is a friendly and pleasant man who runs a decent gym. That day, Mr. Sheehy approached me with a request. I wouldn't say it was one of his first requests. Knowing that I was a widower, Sheehy constantly tried to set me up with any female visitor to the hall. What a matchmaker. This time was no exception. I had to help this girl get used to the gym. I certainly couldn't refuse, for Mr. Shakai had always been kind to me despite all his quirks. Approaching the visitor, I inquired whether she really needed my help, and it turned out that she did need help. Not even 2 minutes had passed since our dialogue began when Marie, yes, she had managed to introduce herself, collapsed onto the floor of the hall. And then the most interesting thing began. Some armed people burst into the hall. I even thought it might be a robbery. The situation is tense and unclear. Mr. Shaki ordered everyone to lie on the floor. A caring man. When these 3 armed men appeared, my headache intensified threefold. I tried not to leave Marie, no matter what happened. These people started shooting at Mr. Shaki. I don't know what the bullets were made of, but the true nature of the gym owner began to manifest itself. Watching what was happening, I did not understand what was going on. Mr. Sheehy lost his human form and was fighting these people. My head was in such a painful state that I was afraid of losing consciousness. A miracle did not happen, and I still lost consciousness. The last thing I saw was an uneven fight. I don't know how long I was out, but when I came to, I saw that the entire gym building was on fire, and there were no longer any of those armed people or Mr. Sheehy. But Marie was still lying unconscious on the floor. Of course, I could not leave her there to burn alive. We needed to get out of the building immediately. What happened next, I naturally did not expect. The electrical wires broke. After some time, Mason was in a wonderful mood as he walked along the city. This was truly a miracle. After such a discharge, I remained alive, and there was one thing in my head: to save Marie. In addition, his house was located in a controlled area, and there was no internet throughout the city. I mustered all my strength, drenched in sweat, and told myself that we must get out of this trap alive. As soon as I strained, something supernatural happened. A portal opened from the building outside. We were saved. Suddenly I heard footsteps behind me. It could be anyone, from those armed people to a rescue team. But no, it was that guy from the cemetery. What is he even doing here? He ordered me not to move, and he himself, with the help of his magic, extinguished the fire in the gym. Interestingly, couldn't it have been done earlier? As soon as he finished with the haul, he set to work on me. What should I expect? I had a ton of questions for this comrade, but for some reason he started interrogating me seriously. A young man did not introduce himself, but said that he found himself in this place because he felt the dragon's fire. At the moment of his arrival, the victim, witness, and criminals had disappeared. While he was telling all this, I did not believe in reality. Why were all his questions incomprehensible to me? How should I answer about the classification if I don't know what it's about? Little did they care that there were no explanations whatsoever. They even put handcuffs on me. Never mind that I almost died in that gym. There was still one plus from these handcuffs. The headache had noticeably gone away. And so, after some time, I was delivered to some place which, as it turned out later, was the Guild of Magical Regulation. These two, in a separate office, were discussing my abilities and trying to figure out what was wrong with me and why handcuffs helped me cope with a headache. A dark-skinned man assured that when I was caught, I did not understand what was happening, which means I definitely did not know anything. He explained what happened in the gym. It turned out that the security system was supposed to make sure that no one saw anything in the gym from start to finish. But there was something wrong with me. The discussions continued for quite a long time, as it turned out that in their practice there had been no similar case where a child with abilities was born into an ordinary family and did not know about them for 30 whole years. The turn came to me. A man in glasses and a business suit came for interrogation. You see, he studied everything and allegedly understood that I was not guilty of this incident. An interesting young man, of course. He decided that now that they had noticed me, they should take me under control in their magical domains. They should at least have asked me if I needed it. It turned out that all mages have a special registration with them and loyally serve in their guild. And yes, they had no practice with a great-aged mage. They wanted to turn my life upside down. I already have a good job and a decent life. His argument that in the future, when all my magical skills are mastered and a much better job is found, did not appeal to me at all for now. I had no options or choice whatsoever. If I don't do as they dictate to me, a terrible fate awaits me. This is their guild searching for all deserters, and then they execute them. They are considered criminals for mages and people. And here I am not one-on-one with Terran, but an entire delegation is looking at me and dictating the rules to me. I am, after all, such an experimental mouse, which is to be trained first and then distributed. These smart and businesslike people want power over all of us, and if there is no such desire, then please wait for death. This situation does not suit me at all. Again, this businesslike boy started a dialogue with me, inquired if I was ready for testing. As a person new to this business, I would like to know what this test is all about. The essence is that I will receive superpowers through a special device, and as much of this superpower flows into me, they will understand my type of magic. It's like some kind of fantasy. Naturally, I was interested in the time period of this trial. The answer was satisfactory. A few seconds and the test would be over. As soon as the special device was turned on, I felt nothing. But at the same second, I was struck down and fell to the floor, holding my head. Again, this hellish pain. It seemed to me that everything was not going as it should. But my condition was of no interest to them. They were only concerned with the test results. Meanwhile, it seemed to me that all this had been going on for an eternity. I could not cope with my pain. It seemed to me that I was slowly dying. Opening my eyes, which was surprising, the first person I saw was that same businesslike man in glasses again. Strange that he even inquired about my health. They almost killed me with their testing. From what happened during the test, the mages themselves were shocked by what they saw. They had never had such cases before. And they attributed everything to my age. The most interesting thing is that they did not sit idly while I was unconscious. They put their mark on me without even asking for my permission. I understood from the words of the guild person that my type is a space mage. They don't often encounter such mages. Therefore, they decided that I would need a mentor whom I would also have to provide for. My indignation knew no bounds. All these events spun too quickly for me to continue my studies. I needed to finish all my business at home. The answer was ambiguous, but I was introduced to an agent named Sen. He is supposed to be with me all the time, at least until the distribution takes place. I used all the manners of decency when meeting, but this agent Sen didn't even bother to shake hands and look away from the phone. We set off on business. Although this guy was unpleasant to me, I still wanted to find out at least something about my distribution as a space mage. As strange as it may seem, Sen agreed to a dialogue and replied that mages like me are not sent to the front lines, which means that I will be sent to the transportation department to be either a loader or a porter. In turn, Sen replied that he was a pyromancer and a bit of an aeromancer, which is why he was often on the front lines. What the agent said did not inspire confidence in me. He did not seem like a frontline worker. I had no way to find out about the guild, so we make do with what we have. What is the essence of the guild? I asked. To which I received an answer that the main task of the guild is the hunt for deserters. But there are cases when not only mages, but also people are sent to the front lines in the worlds of the 6 portals. The further, the more interesting, what other worlds of portals? Here he realized that I was a novice in these matters and explained that the worlds of portals are small worlds that exist between the Earth and the multiverse. These portals supply the planet with superpowers, which is why the Guild of Magical Regulation strictly monitors all of this. And also in these worlds, there are their own magical creatures that have a very bad influence on people, and these are vampires, werewolves, sea monsters, and many other creatures similar to these. I had no trust in Sen's words at all, especially since he said that there were 6 worlds, and the 6th one turned out to be empty, which cannot be the case. Finally, our little journey is over, and we have reached my home. Sen came into the house with me and handed me a laptop containing the basics of magic. On the laptop was drawn the emblem of the guild, and inside was my headache. I had to get acquainted with the magical basics and gather everything I needed by the evening. For, as Sen said, now I would be living at the headquarters. Curiosity took over and I wanted to get acquainted with the base as soon as possible. Magic is divided into 2 types, mana and vis. Mana is similar to the Earth's atmosphere and it is easily accessible for mages. And the magic that the mage himself creates is called vis. It is divided into categories, such as spatial mages or pyromancers. All this exhausted me so much that I passed out right at the table without having time to pack anything up. My responsibility gave me no rest, and as soon as I woke up, I decided that I needed to start acting. All mages are trained in magic from childhood and succeed, but I have already missed a lot. Decided to start with the simplest, with a pen. I needed focus for my mana to manifest. The energy of the superpower began to move the handle in different directions, at least some success. But at the same moment, the handle rushed upward and pierced the ceiling. I can be proud of myself at the early stages and already such a success. Now I practiced mana magic, I need to learn to use vis magic I managed once, I will succeed the next times. Magic is not so bad. Maybe it's worth staying under the guild's control. There will be an opportunity to practice skills. Still, I have doubts about this magical organization. After all, it includes all the powerful people of the world. While there is internet access, let's look for the secrets of this organization. As they say, if you don't know the ford, don't go into the water. Even without digging deep, this Sen deliberately didn't tell the whole story. There are nuances in the distribution after all. It's hard to wrap one's head around the fact that the mortality rate in the guild is over 50%. High mortality among those mages who refuse to work with the guild or major families. Now it's clear why they want power over everyone, for archmages can live quite long. Is it really so that after all these years, they are still interested in this world? Why take lives from others just to continue living yourself? I don't understand why this organization is needed. After all, the world is changing and people could exist without this guild. They are still fighting only for their own interests. Everything I've definitely decided for myself that I won't be a pawn in their game. While Sen is sleeping soundly, I need to start acting. I will be better off as a deserter than die for the guild. I will gather everything necessary and ride off into the sunset. You may begin the hunt, loyal hounds. Everything was so perfect, why this vile creak? Jin approached him and said that his fencing was wonderful and asked him to show him a few moves during the break. Jin added shyly that he knew Mason was also training for the first time today. Sen was furious. The novice mage who couldn't even control magic had escaped right from under his nose. I decided that for now I needed to blend into the crowd. I needed to buy time and come up with a plan. Knowledge of magic would not hurt me, of course. I'm fast, but I don't possess magical abilities, and that's just not fair. Considering that he spoke about his vise, it means he is capable of flying. I only pray that it's not as fast as an eagle. In any case, my chances of success are too small. Despite all these arguments, I continued on my way. Someone was playing basketball on the playground, while others were playing board games or hanging out on their phones. He knew that if my justification was not substantiated, I would be considered a criminal, and a much more sinister wizard would deal with me. Sen continued his search and thought about how to properly deal with me, whether to report to Terran or leave everything as it is. But he understood that if he reported everything to his superiors, he would definitely not be patted on the head, and he didn't know what the consequences would be either. So he decided to deal with the situation on his own. Oh no, I didn't think he would find me so soon. What a mastery of magic. I must urgently run and escape from him. I escaped once. I'll escape a second time. The agent didn't like this game of cat and mouse. He was confident in himself and his abilities. I did not give up and continued to run from this agent. Let him try to catch me. Meanwhile, to the people who were in the crowd, it seemed that a storm was starting outside. A strong wind rushed in. And it wasn't about the weather phenomena at all, but about the fact that Sen, flying behind me, was so close and low that he literally flew right in front of people's faces. But they didn't notice him, fortunately. They didn't have such an ability as I did. And why did I decide that being in a crowd would make it harder for the agent to deal with me? There it is. Ignorance of all the nuances of magic. Running past the shops, a wonderful idea came to my mind. It's time to change my image. Now is the perfect time for that. Of course, this self-absorbed idiot lost me in the crowd. Did he think I would give in to him so easily? I relaxed in vain. He still managed to find me. My plan was not so good. I'm kidding. It couldn't have gone better. He was happily mistaken, and I bought myself some time. Stopping with this unfamiliar guy who was horrified by the agent's rage, Sen decided to look around after all. His gaze fell on my bag, which I had dropped by the store. The soldier who failed the written test was mocked. I don't understand why he needed my bag. Probably he also has the gift of a hunting dog. He will follow the trail. Magic in his veins was seething with rage. He could not forgive himself that such an ordinary guy without special abilities managed to escape from a mage. Mentor. Meanwhile, I didn't have to hurry anywhere. I managed to confuse him and disappear from sight. So to speak, I saved time. I managed to stop a taxi quickly enough and head to the place where I would be safest. Wesley's farm. But there was no need to relax. We had to continue moving in the crowd, so we didn't need the highway. Moving by taxi is not an option for long distances, so I needed a plane that wouldn't show up on radar. And only farmers have such planes, so I'll pay and fly in a crop duster. Of course, not the fastest option, but reliable. I need to do something about the appearance. I've already been exposed enough in this regard. There will be a major image change, just to be sure, although maybe with some magical sense of smell, they will be able to recognize me. I think dyeing my hair and getting a short haircut could save my life. It's a start. The next problem is my documents. I need to change my ID. Most likely they will help me figure this out at the magic pawn shop. I need to find the nearest one as soon as possible. Oh, what a miracle. There was such a pawn shop nearby, behind the counter of which was an inhuman creature. I explained to him the essence of the problem with the documents. He replied that the price would be $2,000, I agreed, but I also asked for a laptop. It might come in handy for me. I hope now I will be completely untraceable. I can be proud of myself. I managed to get new documents and my name is Chase Hall. Not so bad. I value my freedom, which means I will hide even better, because for all my 30 years, the Guild of Magical Regulation did not know about me. So let them fail to find me again now. And our self-absorbed Sen decided after all that he could not cope alone, so it was high time to tell everything to his superiors. Terran was not thrilled with the failure. Sen's task was the simplest. Naturally, the agent justified himself as best he could. He did not think that I was so smart and cunning. He did not even suspect that I could escape from my own apartment through the window. The magic spell on the doors did not help him. Everything is still there. They have a search dog. The same agent who detained me the first time didn't smell any magic in my house, right? Because I didn't use it. I got around it in a simple human way. Agent Terran was beside himself, for all the reporting to Archimage Duval rested on his shoulders. A plan for my training had already been devised upstairs. Ha, that's what they deserve. And this agent, whose name is Jean, no slouch, decided to sneer, saying that the Archmage Duval is quite a lady. You clearly can't mess with her. Under Duval's hot hand, no one wanted to fall, especially Agent Terran. He would gladly shift his responsibility onto the cheerful Agent Jean. He was of heroic physique and confident of his success. Here's Terran, not worrying at all about his tribesmen, while Jean, gritting his teeth, endured hellish pain and continued to make excuses for the missed wells. Jean reported that everyone who can is already searching for Mr. Wells. Not only mages, but even vampires and werewolves are searching, although there is little hope for them. But still, there is some. The Archmage of Duvala did not loosen her grip and waited for a more thoughtful and weighty argument. Jean, on the other hand, assumed that a novice would not be able to handle spatial magic alone, and therefore might have preferred a simple, peaceful, human life, which he had had before. Duvala only laughed at the agent's arguments. She did not understand how a person who had felt magic in their body could refuse it. It was all nonsense, nothing more. Archmage Duvala declared Wells a rogue mage, and now the task of all mages in the guild is to find this scoundrel at all costs. I don't know why I was needed by this person, but she was begging Agent Jean to find me. Her mood was serious. She was ready to rush off to search for me herself, just to find and execute me. While passions were raging at headquarters, I managed to reach a small town in the west. Near the little house that I was going to buy, two people were waiting for me, a nice girl and a sheriff. Strange, of course. Perhaps they were both the owners of this house. But it turned out that the only owner was a girl named Jessica, and she was the daughter of the very sheriff who, by the way, introduced himself as Arthur Langley. When it was my turn to introduce myself, the sheriff looked at me strangely for some reason, as if he suspected something. Upon entering the house, I immediately liked it. The house is located in a quiet place in some remote area, and there will be no time for boredom, as I will be busy with household chores. For some reason, after those words, Jessica decided that I was retired, and that's why I decided to move to the village. It seems my answer that I decided to allow myself to relax a little and be alone did not satisfy them. Jessica was surprised that the house had been on the market for quite some time and that the few buyers did not like Jessica's house. I replied that this was exactly the kind of house I needed. And anyway, what difference did it make to them since I had already agreed to the purchase? The next morning, in the new house, I had to think over my further actions and calculate the budget, which would be enough for only 2 years. Not bad in general, but what would happen next? While I have free time, I need to study magic. After all, it doesn't give me peace. If you think logically, then sooner or later the guild will still find me, and I feel that I will need knowledge in the field of magic to fight them. Since my type of magic is spatial magic, they will start with studying what is needed. I am unlikely to be able to find out anything, because the reference books state that spatial magic has only portals and enchantments. Something is hard to believe. There must be loopholes. The backstory, which is unknown to me but popular in the guild. At the headquarters, Duvala herself deals with space magic. She is strong in this direction, and without her help, no one can cope with magic. Not for nothing is she an authority in the guild, to such an extent that ordinary mages fear her. Since I don't have a theory, we'll try practicing. I need to recall that very day in detail. Then on a subconscious level, I needed to save myself and also save Marie. Everything happened unexpectedly and by chance. My task now is to make the portals open when I need them to. No need to try is no big deal. I could not even think that I would succeed on the first try. Now the main thing is to find out where this portal leads. I take a cherished step into the unknown, thinking that nothing terrible will happen. I consider this a success. I moved a short distance from home to the forest through a portal. What else can the magic of space do? You need to engage your imagination. The magic of space entered my life on a daily basis. So, for example, with the help of magic, I was able to get shampoo without leaving the bath. It's very convenient, by the way. On Wednesday, I tried to practice my Viz magic, that is, the magic of talent. Of course, the children who are at the school at the guild are lucky. They are taught all this from childhood, and I would have to figure it out myself somehow. Yes, and I must admit that magic is captivating. This tangle of energy is subject only to me. On Friday, for some reason, I remembered telekinesis, which is usually observed only in battle mages, which I am not, but can I somehow use it? I remembered gravitikinesis as well. That means I can control gravity. I think no one had thought of that before, although what do I really know about magic? Here's how I was able to construct a weapon from non-combat magic. On Sunday, I decided it was time to meditate. Using superpowers, I can see with closed eyes. The distance is not so great yet, but I think it will get better further on. And if you make an effort, you can look through things. But such practice is too labor-intensive. What a turn of events. While I was away from home, it turns out I had guests. It's interesting why Jessica, the former owner of the house, showed up. It turns out that during school hours, children go through Jessica's, now Wells's, yard, and she decided that it would be necessary to warn the new resident about such a situation. But the yard was cleared only halfway, as I said, and Jessica offered the help of the guys for whom it's useful to spend time outdoors. And it's so strange. She sold that house, but not far away she got herself another one. Out of politeness, she even invites a stranger for tea. She showed up at the wrong time. It seems to me that she still suspected something and saw the magical traces. I need to hurry and find a way to get rid of the residual magic. Otherwise, I won't last long here. And at the guild headquarters, documents with my testing arrived. It turned out that the medical workers there were not working so well, since they did not immediately notice that it was in that very device that I had dissipated 100 toms of supernatural power. And yes, a tom is a unit of measurement for magical energy. Honey. The researcher continued her report. As it turned out, I was able to absorb 97 thoms, and that was before the bracelet was put on me. For a novice mage, this is too much power. Perhaps it happened because he had never used magic in all his 30 years. Such a practice had never existed in the guild before, but it could be assumed that due to this test, my mana was filled to the brim. The Guild of Magical Regulation was, oh, how interesting to me. I still managed to perform this magic. I was able to unlock the magic of my talent. Using the internet, I learned one little trick. With the help of a bearing, you can collect energy. Thus, all the remnants of energy will be collected on the balls in the bearing, which will make my life easier. There is also another plus. It will now be harder for the guilds to find me. Magic yielded to me in training. With each passing day, I got better and better. But cats were scratching at my soul. No, not because of the escape from the guild, but because of this whole situation that happened to me. Everything that happened to me recently happened on the day of my mother's funeral. A heavy and irreparable loss that I couldn't even get over inside myself. In my life, there were no more people close to me left. Everyone had already been buried. My father, my beloved wife, and now my mother is gone too. Sadness, melancholy, and memories of my bright past overwhelmed me. How happy I was when they were all alive and well. It was a wonderful time. A pity that it cannot be brought back. I wondered if Celine, my dearly beloved wife, would like it here. How would she react to such a radical change of scenery? All this was too much already. Nothing from the past could be brought back. One had to live in the present. One must always be on guard and not succumb to the Guild of Magical Regulation. Not let them make a slave out of oneself. I must not surrender no matter what happens. Well, the next task I had to deal with was to find out everything about my new place of residence. I didn't need to stand out from the crowd. I decided to visit the local cafe. The waitress, of course, could not know me, but she was friendly enough and recommended their signature steak. During the conversation with the waitress, I felt something unusual. My spatial magic showed me the entire building without any effort. For example, I was able to see the basement room of the cafe. It turned out to be much larger than I had imagined. It's so strange, but for some reason I saw a dog in the basement, and such a big one that it was the size of a human. I might have sniffed out more if I hadn't been interrupted by the local sheriff, who found it strange that I could get out of my house anywhere. It turned out that the waitress is the sheriff's niece, and her name is Clara. It is she who cooks the best steaks. Clara was so young that I even remembered that children are not allowed in my yard, although Jessica insisted otherwise. Sheriff Arthur somehow strangely said that they in their town respectfully treat foreign territories. It was completely unclear what he meant. But he decided to warn me, as a local resident, that suspicious guys had appeared in the city. In this city, everyone warns each other about strange things by word of mouth. Yes, and the sheriff spoke about me to the locals, but apparently I didn't seem too suspicious to him. While we were talking to the sheriff, Clara had time to prepare my order. I still can't get used to my new name. If suspicious guys appeared in the city, there is a chance that it's from the guild. They could have tracked me down only by their mark. Another little problem has emerged that needs to be urgently solved before it's too late. Examining the tattoo, I assumed that the dot in the middle of the tattoo limits my magic. Or rather, it gives the possibility of only spatial magic and nothing more. I must get rid of her. A drop of ink won't be too painful to erase. It seems I was very wrong about that. Through pain and blood, I still managed to get rid of this point. As they say, according to internet sources, the rest of the tattoo will fade on its own over time. To be more confident, I decided to burn this point. It should work. The next day, I continued to deal with magic, or rather with the vortex spell, which could hold my vis magic. but could also release it. I haven't opened any large-scale portals yet, but I'm afraid that after that my powers will leave me. There is, of course, one option, but will it work? What if we try to create a magical power bank? Then I will have the opportunity to recharge if the situation turns out to be unplanned. While I was pondering, someone decided to pay a visit. Should I open the door? What if it's already from the Guild of Magical Regulation? This is not from the Guild, of course, but why did the sheriff decide to visit me and not alone? With all kindness and friendliness, I met Arthur. He immediately moved from pleasantries to business, for some reason deciding to interrogate me. Without answering my question about what happened, he inquired where I was at 3 o'clock in the morning. Very strange, of course. Recalling yesterday, I can say with certainty that at 3 o'clock in the morning I was at home, tossing and turning, unable to sleep because of my thoughts. And specifically, why is the word territories used in the local community? No, I'm sure that the Langley family are werewolves. The message was unclear, whether Sheriff Arthur wanted to intimidate me or, on the contrary, to warn me. As soon as I decided to go to bed, with thoughts that it's better not to stick my neck out once again. Outside the window, some noise was heard. With my magical power, I tried to make out what was happening on the street. It seemed to me that there was an animal there, but since my magical long-sightedness was not so well developed, I decided to go outside. But that was not the case. I definitely did not expect to see that. I rushed into the house in horror and quickly closed all the windows and doors. It could seem that I was taking too long to answer the sheriff's question. I just needed to come up with the right answer. The most truthful answer I considered was to say that at that time I was already asleep. But my words were not enough for the sheriff. He needed evidence. Seeing my tension, Arthur hurried to inform me that they wanted to remove me from the list of suspects. Of course, I have a security system, but it only works on the doors, and I didn't have and won't have any cameras. Why do I need, just in case, recordings of my magical training sessions that I studied in the backyard of my own home? Arthur Langley explained that a murder had occurred on the street above during the night. A murder occurred at Old Hardy's house. The sheriff believed my words that I didn't hear or see anything that night. No, that night there were neither agents from the guild nor werewolves from the Langley family. There was, most likely, the very killer of Old Man Hardy. They just never left this world. I woke up that night because of the noise outside the window, and it seemed to me that this noise was made by some large animal. For the first time during our entire dialogue, the sheriff's assistant was surprised. And Arthur in turn said that this could be a clue in the case. As soon as the law enforcers left my house, the assistant asked if my words should be trusted. He knew that I was not guilty of Old Hardy's death, but there was still something I wasn't telling him. And they, it turned out, knew who was involved in the murder, but for some reason hoped for a different outcome. The situation that was happening now in the city was a bit creepy, which made the sheriff tense. Having arrived at the suspect's location, Arthur was furious and shouted that the very same person was violating the boundaries by entering the territory of Vinut's pack. It turned out that he came to the local vampire, which is not surprising at all, and accused him of the old man's death. The vampire was completely calm and insolent. Arthur said that the subjects of this vampire tried to work cleanly so that suspicions would not fall on them, but the sheriff had a nose for such types. The vampire continued to be insolent and pretended that he knew and understood nothing, and that the murder had occurred on Vinut's territory, which meant that the responsibility for maintaining order lay with the sheriff. But then the smirk disappeared from the vampire's face, and he said with a serious expression that accusing his guys of murder would not go unpunished. Langley continued, "The disorder among the vampires began with the appearance of this vampire in the city. Arthur wanted justice and punishment for these scoundrels. The vampire was calm and ready to accept the challenge of Vinut's pack. Arthur's anger knew no bounds. He wanted to tear this little vampire apart. The vampire ordered his deputy to expel the sheriff. It was necessary to decide something. Arthur was torn apart with anger. He understood that they would not be able to resist the vampires, since their number is much larger than the werewolves. He was also angered that their leader did not contact Arthur. Langley wanted to bring order to his city, but these bloodsuckers only spoiled everything. It's a pity that the sheriff's age is no longer so brisk. All the anger was heard by Alpha Chester, the chief over the sheriff. Remaining on the line, he tried to convey to Arthur that without evidence of the vampire's involvement, the guild would not stand up for the werewolves. Chester could only send reinforcements, and that's all, warning that unnecessary fuss was useless now. Alpha Chester knew much more, but there was no confirmation of this yet, and Langley tried to understand why the vampires chose Winute. It turned out that Vinute was not the only such city. Similar crimes were observed in 5 more cities. Arthur was concerned about the question of why universal rules were being violated. But Chester's answer was simple. Ironclad evidence was needed. Jessica and Arthur's attentiveness had to be 100%. It was not important when the next victim would be. But who? After all these events, while buying gears, I thought again that one needs to be very careful. In terms of money, I'm not broke, of course, but I would also like to earn some. Everything happening around stresses me out. Soon I will have to leave this town of Vinut. Such a situation does not suit me because everything was so perfectly arranged in this city, and I invested a decent amount of money into the house. My ideal plan was that I could enchant items and sell them. But even in this matter, something did not work out for me. On the magic forums, registration was required for sales, but it was not worth the risk because my magic on bearings did not last 3 hours, and I could easily be tracked down by my account. 3 goblins with wooden clubs in their hands rushed at the young man. I had many ideas, but not enough knowledge. If only I could obtain all the knowledge possessed by Archmage Duval, I'm sure I would succeed in many endeavors. I also decided that it was time to get a gun in such troubled times. And it's not just about the killers wandering around the city, but about those very guild agents who can show up from out of nowhere. I kept glancing at the rifle, but there was no guarantee that it would save me from the magical agents. Examining a suitable option, I noticed the Langley sisters, who were clearly frightened and for some reason were taking hammers. Could they have started repairs at such an unquiet time? I only wanted to greet these 2 lovely ladies, but they immediately became terrified. I apologized. I didn't want anyone to get scared. It was probably because of the murder, I assumed. But Clara, with a sad look, mentioned some Joan who was a parishioner at the church. I got completely confused and did not understand what it was about, because the murder took place in Old Hardy's house. Clara clarified the situation for me, saying that last night there was another murder, the murder of parishioner Joan Gruber. Engaged only with myself and my own affairs, I did not notice such obvious things. This reality frightened me. Could it be that a serial killer had appeared in such a small town? Clara and Jessica were in despair. Their family was considering closing the cafe during these murders. I offered my help if needed and asked to address me simply by name. Chase. Mason also looked at the girl and thought about something. 2 deaths in a week. That's a bit too much for the Langley family, who loves their city so madly and cannot stop these crimes. If the murders continue, the Guild of Magical Regulation may get involved. During an internal search, they will somehow stumble upon me, and I don't need that at all. I'll conduct my own investigation, since all these victims lived near me, and judging by the frequency of deaths, the next murder should happen today. From the bus window, Mason saw a girl standing nearby and couldn't understand why she had come. And secondly, the Magic Guild will still descend on this small town to find out the reasons. At night, I decided to use my magic to the fullest and try to notice the enemy from afar. I was on the alert. I had already loaded the gun, and he gathered all the necessary things for escape, of course. The distance home. But freedom is much more important. I still practiced my spatial magic and could already see everything that was happening in the city. For example, Jessica was in a cafe and was guarding it. Clara went to the store in such a dark and restless time. The sheriff in turn is at the station, most likely trying to solve the case. I have a premonition that the night will not be the calmest. No one could have foreseen, but I fell asleep. How is that even possible? But at the same time, an agitated Jessica knocked on my door. She was all in tears and asked for help, blaming herself for everything. I did not understand what had happened and how I could help. As it turned out, these scoundrels stole Clara. The question was about whom. Details and specifics were needed. The kidnappers of Clara were vampires who were lying in wait for her. There were several of them, and she was alone. They simply surrounded her. These vampires did not kill Clara, but managed to take her to their vampire lair. Once, when I offered my help in the store, Jessica came running to me. I did not know what to do. I cannot know for sure whether she saw my magical traces then or not. Whether she came to me for help just like that or as to a wizard. I suggested that she enter the house and calm down a bit while I gained some time to make a decision. The decision came like lightning. I decided that I must help the Langley family no matter what, because these vampires have a mere child as a hostage. Bringing Jessica home, I decided to ask for details about why they captured her but did not kill her. I was listening to Jessica. But I was thinking about how I would deal with these magical creatures, since I had no experience in such a battle. Langley begged for help, and I promised to help as much as I could, but I needed more details. Already setting out to search for Clara, I was pondering whether I was making a mistake, for the guild and its agents could catch me at any moment. Approaching the motel, I again felt that something was wrong. Something supernatural was clearly going on here. He wanted to summon his shadow friend. Driving up to the motel, Jessica said that her family would help sort everything out. Upon entering the room, I was once again convinced that I had not been mistaken before and that the entire Langley family were werewolves. There were quite a few of them gathered. Now he didn't need a killer, so this summoned one was just what he needed. By the police uniform and badge, I assumed that this very werewolf was Sheriff Arthur Langley himself. From his words, I understood that he considers me a mage from the Guild of Magical Regulation. I immediately stood up for Jessica, and I told everyone that I wasn't here and no one saw me. These words or my action provoked the anger of the werewolf sheriff, but he asked everyone again about hearing my words. Well, after that, I was interrogated again. Interrogated about my plans to fight vampires. I immediately stated my rules and that I was very much looking forward to all the details. Without any objections, the sheriff began the dialogue. He reported that vampires had settled in the motel that Wells and Jessica had passed by. It was there that Callum had felt something strange. The vampires had settled there and decided to seize the werewolves' territory. The sheriff also pointed out that these vampires did not come alone, but with a mage, because for a whole week, Arthur has been sensing his scent. After Langley's words that vampires were involved in the murders, I questioned the reliability of this information and why no action had been taken. The sheriff explained that the werewolf pack currently cannot retaliate due to their numbers. They are simply being killed off one by one. And without evidence, werewolves during an attack will generally be counted as aggressors, and the guild will side with the vampires. There is also some kind of agreement between them, which for some reason cannot be terminated in such emergency situations. Using space magic, I made it to the motel where Clara was staying. I found her, and it turns out she went with the vampires herself. The sheriff was furious. He did not want to believe it. It was simply impossible. I was interested in a different question. What would happen after Clara's return? Arthur reported that Alpha Chester had promised to send them reinforcements and they would easily be able to get rid of the vampires. It's interesting, but how can you kill a vampire? It turns out that there is such a weapon made of an alloy of metals in the world that is capable of destroying all magical creatures. It's a pity that werewolves don't have such a weapon. Instead, as an option, you can pierce their heart and smash their head. Chuck confirmed that Corporal Mason single-handedly dealt with them. Peeking at the Vampiriatas, I saw how quickly they could move. It will clearly be difficult, but it's worth a try. With hope in her voice, Jessica decided to ask again if I could help them. I think my determined attitude spoke for itself, but something needs to be prepared for the case. To carry out my plan, I needed a soundproof place and several pillows. The sheriff was able to provide me with a cell for prisoners in this case. There was little time to carry out what I had in mind, but 10 minutes would have been enough for me. Everything I needed had already been kindly provided to me. Before starting what I had in mind, I once again tried to soberly assess the correctness of my decision. The probability of success is not so great. If the plan fails, then I will be exposed to the guild, the werewolves will be disappointed, and I will be enemy number one for the vampires. As they say, who doesn't take risks, the girl is alive and needs to be rescued urgently. Meanwhile at the motel, the vampires were discussing the fact that there was absolutely no action from the werewolves. Not like them. While the vampires were chattering, Chase proceeded to execute his plan. He assumed that the main mage among them was the girl smoking on the balcony. Therefore, he started the attack precisely with her. Having opened a portal from the police station, Chase began firing at the bloodsuckers. The vampires definitely did not expect such a turn of events. While the pale-skinned ones were causing a fuss, I began counting. My daily reflections on the perfection of magic have come in handy. And now I have my first experience. I think the idea of portals and weapons is simply excellent. Being in one room, I can shoot at people in another room. This way, I have minimal chances of dying. It's time to use the shotgun on the bloodsuckers before they cause a ruckus. Vampires did not have time to warn their kindred and died one after another. Living vampires were not yet observed near Clara, which meant it was high time for teleportation. It was not so easy to simply take her and teleport. She had too little magical energy in her hands. Everything worked out, but such human teleports are not easy for me. I'm not that strong in the magical sense yet. And here comes the next victim. I was already quite exhausted, but the case was not finished. The bloodsuckers sniffed out the scale of the tragedy, thought they could deal with me. They did not understand where the shooting was coming from. They decided to run to inspect the surroundings. Well, good luck. No creature will leave this motel alive, even if I have to spend all my mana, but I will see it through to the end. Jessica and Arthur were waiting for me outside the doors as soon as the shooting stopped. I informed them that it was all over and Clara had been saved. Clara was beside herself and did not understand what was happening around her. Jessica tried to bring her to her senses. Leaving the police station, Sheriff asked in amazement how I managed to pull it all off in 45 seconds and what ultimately happened to the vampires. I said it as it was, that they were all killed. I completely forgot to say that fire trucks are needed at the motel while it's not too late yet. But Arthur did not hear me and continued to ask questions, saying that I did not smell of magic at all. But here he noticed a homemade amulet made of gears on me, and he could not put everything together. But I hurried him up, as the fire could engulf the entire area. This was a valuable battle, for I was able to collect many curious things from the vampires that needed to be sorted out. He was glad of the realism of what was happening, and it's complete. I was surprised by her appearance, for I thought that Clara needed her support, but she only wanted to thank me. Her gratitude turned out to be a kiss that I definitely did not expect. Kissing me, Jessica immediately disappeared, saying that she was needed by Clara. And I, out of bewilderment, managed only to mumble something like another meeting. Meanwhile, Arthur, along with the other werewolves, called Chester to inform him that the issue with the vampires had been resolved. Alpha Chester was worried that the werewolves had violated the agreement, but Langley assured him that the werewolves had not touched the vampires. Then Chester needed details. The sheriff told about Chase, that he helped anonymously and asked not to ask unnecessary questions. He coped with the task. Chester wouldn't let up. He needed to know who this guy was, a wizard or a werewolf. Arthur said he noticed a wizard's tattoo, but there was no magical scent. Chester warned Arthur that they needed to be on guard, as there were other vampires left. But if there were no violations on our side, they would not be able to do anything. Langley, looking at his relatives, added that now the werewolves owed him. Chester did not understand who he was talking about, but ordered not to take his eyes off Chase, adding that they could not trust the mages. Having returned from the police station, I had been taking a shower for half an hour already. I felt as if I was covered in dirt that could not be washed off, all because I was a murderer. This was my first battle, and with vampires at that, I don't understand why everything turned out so easy and simple. My magical studies have only just begun, and there is much I do not know. If I were to become a criminal, then no one would be able to stop me. I suppose the guild is right that such people need to be destroyed. No, it is precisely in this case that the guild is wrong, and if it were not for me and my abilities, Clara would already be dead. I hoped that all the traces I might have left were burned in the fire and no one would be able to find out anything. But there is no certainty that Langley will remain silent about me. I engaged in self-flagellation and already regretted what I had done. I could have acted completely differently and remained undiscovered, but now I will have to leave the city. And at that time, the sheriff dropped by the cafe to meet someone, but with whom? The administrator reported that the guests were waiting downstairs, while Arthur in turn said that the wrong person had been sent. These were agents, Ray Danforth and Felicia Black. Most likely these agents came because of the fuss and will now try to figure out this case. Langley reported that several corpses were seized from the motel for personal verification by agents. Examining the corpses of vampires, Agent Ray was intrigued by the fact that all the wounds were identical. The sheriff in turn hinted that he was not aware of how everything happened, but clearly not with the help of werewolves. Danforth, with a smirk on his face, stated that they would definitely figure it out. Felicia Black's turn for the examination came. As it turned out, she could reconstruct the latest events before the victim's death. The chosen victim was asleep at the moment of their death, which means they did not see anything. The next vampire heard everything, but died without understanding anything. Ray could not believe that no one could see anything before their death. Black assured that panic was to blame for everything. Ray assumed that only a professional could have done it, no other way. But here the sheriff decided to say a word about the terrible wounds on the bodies of the dead, which attracted the attention of the agents. The mages warned Langley that they would not leave it at that and would have to stay in the city for the safety of the citizens. Arthur showed hospitality and said that he was ready to give the guests a ride, but with some slyness, Ray suggested polling the citizens of the city. Most likely he thought that Langley was not telling him something. The agent suggested two options for consideration. Firstly, he assumed that the vampires could have been killed by someone from another city, so to speak, an ill-wisher who would be difficult to find. And secondly, it was a local resident who fell out with the bloodsuckers. The sheriff, as a representative of the town, assured the agents that none of the locals could have done such a thing, let alone single-handedly, for he knew everyone in Venuta. But Ray did not trust him and was confident in his abilities. Mason, meanwhile, was engaged in weightlifting in the gym. In the bag were money, some hard drives, and weapons. Pistols were ordinary, but the bullets, worth their weight in gold. Silverite, Mordite, and Corite. Forums said they could kill any mage, werewolf, vampire, or fairy. I'm sure the bullets will come in handy. At the bottom of the bag, I found painted ceramic tiles that may have belonged to a mage, but there is no time yet to deal with them. In the bag, there was a lot of money and gold. Counting the cash was no problem, but it was difficult to predict how many gold bars there were. I still continued to regret how much money I had poured into this house. I decided that I need to set aside some money for the future. Most likely, I will have to make a major expenditure soon. As my magic grows, purchases from a household store may not be able to cope with the necessary tasks, so something more magically suitable is needed. My gaze fell again on the ceramic tiles. What were they intended for after all? And again, at the most inopportune time, someone came, although I wasn't expecting anyone. My find no one was supposed to see. I didn't need extra questions and suspicions, so it would be better to hide the bag. As it turned out, Jessica and Clara Langley decided to drop by and check if everything was all right with me. The Langley sisters were not sure if I was home, but still decided to check and come over. Jessica said that mages from the guild had arrived in the city to investigate a case related to vampires. I was not ready for such news. I was expecting agents, but not so soon. Clara pressed herself to me in an embrace and uttered words of gratitude. From the moment Chase saved her, she had been trying to go to him all the time. I was flattered, but reminded him of our agreement that I did not participate in this conflict and that it should not be told to anyone. As a token of gratitude, the sisters brought me food from their cafe. I immediately felt hungry and gladly accepted the food, and also invited the Langley sisters for a cup of tea, over which I wanted to learn the details about these agents. Jessica reported that the sheriff and the mages met this morning, and that one of the mages has the ability to speak with the dead, but no data was obtained. This is a very necessary part for me, which saved me this time. Clara assured me that everything had burned down at the motel and no evidence was found. I was glad to hear about the progress of the case, and that so far there were no suspicions against me. In Jessica's next line, I learned that some Alpha Chester is worried about a debt to me. Who is he at all? Clara explained that alphas are called the heads of the city, and Chester is the alpha of the Midwest. So by standing up for our city, I stood up for the entire Midwest. And from that moment on, they all thought I was doing it for something commendable. How wrong they were. I mentioned once again that no one owes me anything, and even more so, no one should know anything. It's worth keeping your tongue behind your teeth. Mages did not calm down and tried to grasp every trifle. One of them was a magical signature that did not carry any meaning. As it turned out, the vampires had a mage aeromancer. Interesting what he was for. Anyway, nothing more magical was noticed, but the vampires made a list of things that were stolen during the massacre. And now Felicia Black will keep an eye on anyone who tries to get rid of these things. It will be their lead. Meanwhile, Ray was worried that the vampires of Minneapolis would not be satisfied with such results. When the agents were left alone, they decided to ponder. The fire gave Ray no peace. He thought that all this was the work of werewolves, but they could have coped without a fire. Black reminded that werewolves deny their guilt, and fire services were called by ordinary peaceful people. Ray was certain that everyone around was either lying or not telling the whole truth. And then he sprayed his mana over the city. But the phone received the numbers and addresses of 3 people who needed to be interviewed, and of course, I was on that list. The magic guilds came to me first. Seeing them, I was terribly worried. I felt that they were much stronger than me. I was afraid that they would expose me. Ray said what the occasion was for their visit and that they had some questions for me. As they say, the best defense is an offense. I immediately warned that I would not say anything without a lawyer. Black hissed something and said that I did not need a lawyer. They were very large, and the commanders ordered the soldiers, but this did not bother Ray, and he asked me about the vampires who lived in Vinut. Black seemed to want to hypnotize me into telling the whole truth. In a blunt manner, I explained that I live only on rumors, and how truthful they all are, I cannot know. After this phrase, they went towards the car, "You can exhale." But it was not to be, you see. The wizard did not finish speaking. I was forbidden to leave the city, as according to their data, I am listed as a suspect in the murder of vampires. Naturally, after these words, it was necessary to immediately run out of the city. Fortunately, the things were already packed. I assumed that the suspicion fell on me because they felt my resistance. Now they will definitely take a keen interest in me. Leaving the city, I really regretted not having time to say goodbye to the Langley family, who had been so kind to me. But there was no time to waste. I think Jessica will be able to understand and forgive me. I was sure that they had already noticed my disappearance, and now the guild would take me seriously. Most likely I was already wanted. I needed to use my magical intuition. And here's the first way out of the situation. I stopped by a car that had a for sale sign on it. Going into the cafe, I realized, what the seller is a werewolf because he reeked just like Langley. I needed new documents, and this guy could help me with that. I put a gold ingot on the table and said that I also needed a car. The guy was clearly surprised. His eyes lit up and he offered to wait a little without further ado. In 10 minutes, he came out with my new documents, adding that these documents were solid both in human society and in the Society of Mages. Since according to the new documents I was a professor, I thought I should have a suitable image. And as a bonus, the werewolf handed me the car keys. The seller inquired if I needed anything else, to which I asked where there was a magic shop with books, supposedly for my student. The guy was no slouch and suggested where the nearest magic shop was located, but immediately warned that the assortment was poor. Naturally, I understood what caused such a shortage of magic books, since the guild blocked any valuable information, being the only source. But still, for tomorrow I planned a trip to that store. Thoughts about the Langley family did not give me peace. Had they discovered my disappearance? My conscience tormented me, and I returned to that store after some time. I returned, to put it bluntly. I opened a portal to this store, which greatly frightened that young man. I asked the werewolf to leave a message for the Midwestern Alpha that Clara's friend is safe. The guy was quick-witted and immediately passed on my message. Chester was tense about this, and he immediately invited those two werewolves who were with the sheriff at the time of our meeting. They could not deny obvious things. They found themselves a job. Now they will be looking for me by scent. Well, that's what werewolves are for. And the agents still hadn't figured out that I had fled the city and were trying to somehow correlate all the data. Felicia noticed my resistance that day and considered me a very unusual person. But Ray suggested that I was simply put under protection, without my knowledge. Black insisted on her own, because I seemed more suspicious to her than the other suspects. Plus, all the victims were my neighbors. She assumed that I could have been the first victim of vampires, but with the help of my protector, I managed to escape. There were no options for the course of events for them, so any version had to be considered, but now they will understand everything. They realized that I had already slipped out of the city, and therefore decided to check my house for the presence of magical power. Oh, how I love their faces when they failed to find anything. My home was completely clean, not a single clue. They checked everything, even the backyard. There were no clues except one. My oversight. Ray discovered my bearing, which was my assistant. This bearing caught their attention only because a crude enchantment was felt. But there were no traces of magic on the bearing, since the metal was ordinary. They continued to believe that I had a protector who was helping me. They understood that I had not escaped in vain. Now I'm definitely wanted. And the bearing clearly interested Ray. Ray was going to the Sheriff Langley to clarify if he was familiar with this thing. To avoid being seen anywhere else, I spent the night in the car. I slept so long that when I woke up, it was already noon outside. In my entire life, I had never had such a deep sleep before, and it was all due to the stress from this whole magical life. I wasted a lot of time sleeping. I had to hurry up so as not to get caught by the Guild of Magical Regulation. It's high time to visit that magic shop. Perhaps there will be something curious there. I found this little shop. It looked somewhat outdated, like an antique. Perhaps at first glance the store seemed unremarkable, but maybe that wasn't required. Upon entering the store, a strong smell of dust was felt. This was an ordinary bookstore with little magical touches. What was it related to? I wanted to start a conversation with the store clerk, but he was not at all friendly or talkative. Therefore, I went to search for the necessary literature myself. Surprisingly, half of the entire assortment was science fiction. The books were so-so, but the prices were simply outrageous. One wonders what for. And here I have indeed found a worthy little book. Magical Protection, a treatise on defense. I decided to skim through it so as not to accidentally come across any more fiction, but the book was worth its money. And here came the disgruntled voice of the seller, as soon as I found on my own what I immediately regretted the little book. I was curious if there were any more books of this kind, but the old man hit the nail on the head by saying that I was too old for these books, of course. I lied to him about my status. Why did he need to know more? Without being distracted from his business, the seller with a wave of his finger took out all the magic books. Shaw had a minor head injury, but it was expected that he would be able to return to headquarters tomorrow. I chose only 4 books that interested me, and I spent a little over $1,000. I was shocked by the impudence of this salesman. I gave him an uneven amount. He didn't give me the change, and then pretended that nothing had happened. What audacity! Mason wanted to write that he hit him with his shield and then finished him off with his fist? They did not have any real success. The scents were too faint. There was no smell of magic, but they were able to catch my physical scent. They even wanted to enter that little shop where I was, but decided not to disturb the people. They clearly sensed my smell and the smell of the car, although I've already changed it. And here, one of these dogs was clearly smarter and was able to notice that there were surveillance cameras in the parking lot, and he even knew who would help them in this case. The idea was good, but they decided to start by turning to some Lucy, who was good at hacking cameras. Meanwhile, I was reading those books in which I thought there would be a lot of useful information. But in the end, I found nothing valuable except for what ceramic tiles are needed for. These tiles are called focus. With their help, you can use complex spells more easily. But again, the book does not contain a single word about this trick in life where it can be obtained. I definitely need another bookstore with an adequate salesperson, and not this misunderstanding that managed to infuriate me. However, Mason was registered as having dropped out of high school, and he would not have been able to enroll in the academy in any case. And here I met fairies who were selling crystals and herbs, but they were completely uninteresting to me. I remembered Shaki too. He was a dragonborn. If there was no information about those like him, then they really were a unique species. I wish he had come out of that duel alive. For it was from that moment that everything began, and I never succeeded in these matters or figured out what had happened there. On the one hand, it may be for the better that I cannot find information. Who knows what I might read there, and they won't show such cases on TV either, so as not to cause unrest among peaceful citizens. And here's another little bookstore. Maybe there'll be something useful there. Only opened the doors and already felt the magic, and a very strong and powerful one at that. She emanated from this girl. Who is she? Very interesting. Let's take a closer look. Maybe she's a student at a magic college. And this elderly couple also looked like wizards. Only I decided to calm myself down with the thought that no one knew anything about me, when that lady cast a glance at me. I was wrong to make a big deal out of it. That woman was just being friendly. The selection is certainly better, but there are books that I've come across before. This girl seems to be looking for something too and is clearly dissatisfied with something. I caught the girl's attention by commenting on what was written in the book. There was little useful information in it. The student reacted positively and said that she had wasted the whole day for nothing, all because of some book. I offered her my help in finding a suitable book, but for some reason she assumed that I was looking for a student in this way. She added that some archmage fine wants to teach her magic, but she did not want to study with him. She did not like him. I dared to assume that this girl was some important person, since the archmage wants to teach her. To avoid being taught by him, it was enough to create my own personal project. She was a healer and it would be easier for her to create a project, but basic knowledge is also very important. An interesting person, I introduced myself. Denver Brown, professor. A pleasant girl healer is called Gail Hargrave. I suggested joint training sessions to her, clarifying if she had time, to which she replied that they don't keep track of time and can do whatever they want whenever they want. I looked at her training list and suggested that she should also add lessons in telekinesis, creating illusions, charms, and enchantments. This was an extensive course of material. I inquired whether she uses offensive spells, since she, as a healer, can conduct rather powerful attacks. My question agitated Gail. They think that healing should cure, but I think that here the question is already in its application. Gail was not an ordinary commoner, but a mage at the best academy, where children from wealthy families studied. Despite the fact that all the teachings at the academy were outdated, she learned a lot. I don't know why, but for myself, I noted that the girl is from a wealthy family. Next, I advised her, as a healer, to study signal cascades, blood coagulation, and neurochemistry. I honestly said that I don't know how the healing magic works properly. I knew for sure that if you want to enhance one thing, then the other will let you down at that time. There will be no balance in the body. My hints were interesting and useful to her, which I was undoubtedly glad about. Closing the textbook, I suggested ending our conversation for today. Based on the conversation, I understood that Gail was happy with our meeting and my advice. She wanted another meeting. But I could not give her a definite answer. The next day, I went again to look for bookstores, and along the way, I thought about how lucky I was to meet a novice mage, such a kind and open girl. At that moment, I did not regret at all that I was able to help her in some way, and I could also learn something from her. And here's the bookstore. Let's see what interesting things there are here. The saleswoman in this store also turned out to be a werewolf girl. She looked good-natured. I chose only 2 books in this store and explained that they were for my student. Suddenly her gaze flashed, and she clarified whether I had found everything. After my affirmative answer, she suggested looking at another bookshelf, inquiring about my time. I suspected that something was wrong and hurried to leave the store, under the pretext that I was already late. She kindly saw me off. She clearly knew something. The self-flagellation mode turned on again. I shouldn't have lingered and helped Gail. It was all a waste of time. But then I noticed a note sticking out of one of the books. It's unclear where this note came from, but it had Alpha Chester's phone number with a request to call. Meanwhile, that very Lucy was reporting to Chester about her achievements in searching for me. For her, as a top-level hacker, finding me was very easy, but she thought rationally and suggested that Chester be one step ahead of me, not behind. She advised me to reflect on where I was heading. She gave a hint that I was too interested in books. Again, using cameras, she traced my route and assumed I was heading south. They created a presumed list of stops. And that's why in that very store they handed me that very note. In this way, Chester wanted me to come to them myself rather than them chasing after me. Approaching the phone booth, I hesitated for a very long time whether I should call first or wait for them to catch me themselves. But since he got in touch, it means something is going wrong. I finally decided to make the call, hoping that there would be at least some clarity. Chester was waiting for my call. Alpha started by saying that for the previous battle, he owes me since I did save his great-grandniece, and I can't be uninvolved in this. As it turned out, vampires are active not only in Venuta, but also in 4 other cities. I understood where he was going, and immediately said that I would no longer put myself in such a position. But he, praising my abilities, added that for this job I could get information about the Guild of Magical Regulation. He understood that money was not as important to me as, for example, information about mages and the structure of their society. To confirm his words, he said that he could arrange a meeting with an acquaintance magician. The information was valuable to me, so I clarified what was required of me. The situation was as follows. Vampires, in order to reduce Chester's influence, were undermining political rules in 4 different cities. When I heard that vampires needed to be eliminated in 4 cities, I doubted my abilities. There were no guarantees that this time everything would go as well as the last time. Besides, the guild agents were also on my tail. I clarified the deadlines, but on the condition that there would first be a meeting with this magic expert, and I was also interested in how he was able to identify me. He told me that his guys were following me, or rather, they were following my scent, but they wouldn't have succeeded if they hadn't guessed that I was peeking into every bookstore. It was so obvious. Chester reported that a folder had been left for me in a trash can near my location, and in this folder were all the data about vampires. I did not give my exact answer. First, I decided to think everything over. Taking the folder, I was surprised by the amount of information it contained. Clearly, the preparation had been good and thorough. The distance between the cities was stated to be over 1,000 kilometers, not close. Having stopped in the nearest forest, I began to think over various options for this job. If I use teleportation, I will only be able to move myself 150 meters. And you can try gravitykinesis. The speed of movement will be lightning fast. Of course, there was no practice before, but it's worth a try, and I succeeded. We need to work more on control. Otherwise, injuries are not far off. I was about to give up on this idea, but I realized that it could help me with gravitokinesis. Only everything was resolved with the werewolves, so these agents kept sniffing around. Using his magic, Ray could not detect anything, but it seemed to him that there was something in this place. And he was right. They were able to find my old car, which I had securely hidden. They understood that they would find nothing in the car, but that she had been here very recently. It spoke of the fact that I did not break away from them as much as I would have liked. And there I am, speeding along the highway on my motorcycle at a breakneck pace. A miracle happened, and I managed to use gravitokinesis. The difference between cities is no longer a problem for me, especially since I also have suitable transportation. I decided that before the job, I needed to visit the vampire lair and understand who I would have to fight. Chester gave me the contacts of the local supervisors, but it's better to avoid them all. With the help of magic, I decided to find that very lair. According to Chester's information, the lair is located somewhere nearby. The local bloodsuckers decided to hide right in the local movie theater. At the moment, there were 9 vampires and 1 earth mage in the cinema. Inside the building on the ground, there were a huge number of magical shields, which meant I had no business being inside the building. I needed to act differently. The mage will not be so easy to deal with. He has very strong protection that I would like for myself. But there is one drawback. The vacuum enchantment will not work. After what I saw, I wondered if I should accept Chester's offer, because this little job would cause a lot of problems. But here I noticed the 10th vampire, who rushed through the hall at a frantic speed. In Vinute, the vampires did not have time to show their abilities, as they did not expect anything like that. This time, I think it won't work. My God, this creature is dragging a child behind it. Soulless bitches. They must get what they deserve. I agreed to Chester's offer and began to think through my plan more precisely. The main thing being that the guild agents would not track me down either. My phone reminded me about a meeting that I was already late for. The meeting was with Gail. She brought a telekinesis trick to be checked at this meeting. She explained that this assignment was not easy for her, but my textbooks helped her achieve the correct formatting. Decided to test it in practice right away. Gail handled the task well. As a token of gratitude, she clung to me with an embrace. Although that was only the beginning. I was glad about her successes and clarified about the classes for the next week. Of course, Gail didn't call to skip classes with me. And I, after the meeting, while there was time, decided to stock up on the necessary little things. It dawned on me, and I realized how to deal with these creatures. At best, they will be destroyed by tomorrow. Repetition will not happen. Everything will go completely differently, not at all in the motel. Instead of bullets, thermite will be used. A mixture of metal oxide and aluminum. Since the temperature of thermite is very high, higher than molten lava, it is usually used for welding rails. I think the termite will do an excellent job with the mugs of these bloodsuckers. It remains to prepare this nuclear mixture. Rust and aluminum foil ground into dust are needed in a ratio of 3:1. The prepared contents are then poured into a soda bottle. Such a quantity of homemade grenades should suffice for the intended plan. All that remains is to distribute them in hiding spots in order to detonate them at the necessary time. And I also found a heavier object. It will also come in handy for me this time. The vampire kids did not understand what awaited them. They were enjoying their pastime. The monster rushed to attack Mason. They burned beautifully, without even suffering. Panic was caused by fire detectors. People got worried. The bastards are afraid of burning. And our grenades flew farther. We cannot delay. Before they realize what happened, we will get rid of them in one fell swoop. Now even the boss is running around in a panic. It smells like something's burning. I was so engrossed in the movie that I didn't even hear when all the fuss started. I know little about mages, but he is a human first and foremost, which means his reaction is also human. I decided that if I lifted the stone to a height and then abruptly dropped it into the portal, the speed would be incredible. The mage will not be able to react instantly and turn into a chop despite all his magical shields. The goblin grabbed Mason's face. Having dealt with this vampire nest, it was necessary to move on to the next ones. An hour later, I had to make sure that no one had survived. Chester had no idea that I had already completed one task and was waiting for news from the vampires. Only Lucy noted that I was doing well with my job. After the report that the second nest was also killed, Chester could not believe his eyes. And I've already been on reconnaissance in the third nest. It was necessary to find out how many of these creatures are there. There were 13 vampires and, again, one protected mage, but the presence of someone else was felt. These were 2 prisoners, 2 civilians. The situation became more complicated. It was necessary first to somehow extract them from captivity while not revealing oneself. I needed a plan to save them, but it had to be done in a way that they didn't see or remember me. I decided that I would deliver these peaceful citizens to a safe place, from where the werewolves could retrieve them. And this safe place will be the local fast food joint. But I'll only deal with that after I get rid of the bloodsuckers. We cannot delay under any circumstances. We need to find the weak spots of this lair. The first is a large gathering of people in one place, and the second, if there are flammable liquids nearby, it will simply be a bomb. Everything is ready. It's time to start acting. As a rule, in this building too, my explosions set off the fire alarms. This frightened the already agitated prisoners considerably. While they were trying to break out of captivity, I had already finished with the vampires and came for them. My appearance in the closed chamber and even from the wall surprised and frightened them. I dictated to them my terms of release, trust in me, and their eyes must be closed. Obedient boys wanted to live and easily trusted me, following my instructions. Without answering their questions, I managed to transfer both of them at once to the cafe's restroom. Leaving, I warned them that they should be followed, and their task was to forget everything that had just happened. I was glad that I succeeded, but I also felt sorry for the guys who didn't understand what had happened to them, and I remembered myself when I first found myself in such a situation. After sending a text to Chester that the people were saved and the vampires were killed, in response, I received a cancellation of the order for the fourth nest. The vampires had fled. I exhaled after Alpha's message, because these teleports consume a lot of energy. I could simply fail to cope with the fourth layer. But it was gratifying to save the cities from the bloodsuckers, and these two lovers, not even for the sake of a deal, but simply for the sake of the people's further peaceful life. Chester, in the company of Lucy and most likely a wizard, was trying to understand how one person could have cleared 3 vampire lairs in such a short time. This man suggested that I have access to the guild's teleport or that I am a fairy. The man also added to his thought that if I was indeed a fairy, then he would not be able to help here. Fairy magic is too mysterious. Lucy was also powerless since I hardly used my phone, so it was impossible to track me. Chester really wanted to find out my secrets and use me further. He was even ready to offer me something more than a conversation with the mage. Jasper. Lucy offered herself as my assistant in the field of technology. She would not have worked for the werewolf Chester if the guild had initially appreciated her merits. The fighters opened fire on the flying monsters. This was the chief vampling who got scared for his miserable bloodsuckers. He started hiding behind the guild, that the werewolves wouldn't get away with it so easily. Chester reported that he did not know what was being discussed, and all werewolves were busy with their own affairs. They were completely indifferent to vampires. Antoine was angry. He was leading his wards away from the Midwest Territory and asked to end this lawlessness, threatening that everyone would pay for the killings of vampires. The guild agents went through the places where I had caused a bit of mischief. They did not know for sure that it was my doing, but Ray insisted on my involvement. He was afraid of me. The unknown frightens. Ray's face brightened after the words that something had been found. And this was a bearing, the second one. Of course it was left behind, but the agents could never understand what I needed it for. Felicia Black was a delicate nature and could not speak in front of strangers, but she had to express her assumption. This was due to the fact that other mages did not have immunity to the siren's skills. Black suggested that the first attack in Venuta was spontaneous, related to the need to save someone dear to me. And that's why a weapon was used to kill the vampires. In these cases, preparation was clearly required. All the details were thought through. These assumptions appealed to Ray, and he decided to latch onto them. They planned a meeting with Chester since all the murders took place in his territory. Before heading to Chester, Ray assumed that such a strange method of killing was more suitable for fairies than werewolves. The agents arrived at Alpha to clarify a couple of details. They did not intend to stand on ceremony and therefore moved straight to the main question about the vampires. Chester in this regard is a real actor. He said that he had heard about Antoine's altercation with vampires and suggested that due to the grievances that existed between them, suspicions would primarily fall on werewolves. But this is not the case, for the resolution of such conflicts is the very purpose of the guild's existence. Oh, these memorized phrases, Chester needs to wise up. But at the most inopportune moment, Alpha's phone rang. Clearly an important call since he needed to answer it. Ray suspected something but did not show it. What kind of phone call was it, during which it was necessary to warn that Alpha was busy? Meanwhile, I was carefully hiding my loot, which I had taken from the vampires. Even if they catch me, they won't be able to find anything since I put all the bags in 4 different lockers in different places, so I'll be clean for the guild. And then Chester called me back and explained that the guild agents had come. They were puzzled as to who could have dealt with the vampires so skillfully. I was interested in only one question, whether the guild managed to find out anything about me. Quinn interrupted the silly stories of his subordinates and announced that the rest was over. Now they needed to move on. Chester moved on to our agreement and reported that there were 2 people who wanted to talk to me. The first was the expert himself, under the pseudonym Harry, and the second was an IT specialist, who decided to give herself the pseudonym Monotoshka. The girl turned out to be not only humorous but also my fan, was so bold that she dared to take the phone from her boss. She offered her services to me, disregarding the fact that she already works for Chester. The offer was tempting, but there was no certainty that this Monotoshka could be trusted. But he decided that her number might come in handy for him. The boss took the phone from Monotoshka and handed it to Gary, who in turn said that the material for me was ready in scanned form and would be sent. Well, and to conclude the conversation, Chester warned me that in addition to the guild, Antoine Levin is now hunting me. Antoine Levin is the master of Minneapolis. Such a bloodthirsty vampire is hard to find. The old man looked at him warily and said that he had been gone for a long time. But now he had returned again. Reading these books was so fascinating that I didn't even notice the evening coming. But there was also very little description of spatial magic in these books. That same evening, I finally decided to call this Monotoshka. She was waiting for my call, but didn't think I would dare to do it so soon. I decided to offer her a job, but didn't yet understand the pricing policy. The girl was in a positive mood. As it turned out, she was from a family of mages, but did not possess any magical ability, which is why she chose tech support for herself. While we were chatting with her, she sent her price list without even bothering that she had indicated her real name, saying that she had nothing to fear since she was under the protection of Alpha Chester. I was surprised that Monotoshka so easily and carelessly trusted Chester, for he was not as strong as I thought, since he needed my help to resolve conflicts with vampires. Monotoshka explained that Chester is a person of royal blood. Even for the most serious crime, he could only be scolded, no more. She also added that only archmages and the head of vampires could be on par with him. When Chester warned me about the vampire chief, I didn't pay much attention to it, but it turns out he's an important bigwig. I really need to be careful. After that, I asked Lucy to do the very job I had called her for. I needed that couple I had saved in the last vampire lair. Lucy had not very good news for me. The werewolves did not have time to save the prisoners then. They were caught by the guild agents. Lucy was interested in the question of how payment would come to her for the work done, to which I was ready to give her a gold ingot weighing 2 kilograms. Monotoshka's happiness knew no bounds. I enjoyed communicating with her. She radiated positivity and carelessness. Meanwhile, our meetings with Gale did not end, and we continued our training with her. During one practical exercise, which was carried out in the library, we were prevented from achieving a result. It was not very convenient to study in that place, but there were no other options. After each lesson, Gale was in awe and tried to find out where I managed to find this or that spell. I skipped all these pleasantries. I was interested if she had conducted the healing experiment and what results she had obtained. She began to recount in great detail, with a very intelligent air, how the experiment was conducted and what came of it. But I did not understand half of what was said, though I tried not to show it. All this was due to the fact that she began studying magic at a young age, and the knowledge that I pass on to her comes much easier to her than to me. A wonderful girl. While I was spending time with Gale, very important people gathered at a very important meeting. At this meeting, Chester was also present, who was dissatisfied that they had to stay late because of one pompous peacock. The man, who was clearly much older than Chester, was calming him down. One could assume that this man was the Archmage. Finally, the latecomer deigned to appear in the negotiation hall. It was Antoine Levin, the head of the vampires. Immediately upon entering the hall, he started an argument with Chester. They argued until the Fairy King calmed them down. Then the Archmage declared the meeting open. And he informed everyone about what was no secret to anyone. They were interested in that very vampire killer. They needed to decide something, to somehow stop this useless slaughter.